Hello and welcome back to the Q&A. So the good news is we actually have enough questions to do us quite a few shows. If you do want to leave a question, then do mention it down in the comments and I'll pick it up and hopefully I'll get to fit it in something. So today's one is, why do you think Mists of Pandaria is getting so much hate in your opinion? Personally, I think the Mists of Pandaria has some of the best leveling in the game, and what do you like about Mists of Pandaria? Well, first of all, everybody always hates the current expansion. It's been a constant in WoW. And it's probably going to continue for a long time. I didn't really play enough of the Burning Crusade to get the full extent, but I know in Wrath everyone was saying, oh, this is so bad, Burning Crusade was better, and now everyone's saying, oh, Wrath is my favourite expansion. So, yeah, it's just weird. It's a bit of a mental sort of thing that internet trolls seem to do. Honestly, I think that this perceived hate against Mists of Pandaria is probably very much exaggerated by a vocal minority. However, there are problems with the expansion, and these are what feed the fire. The fire might be ridiculous, but at least it's kind of fed by things which are legitimate problems. So, let's get into these legitimate problems. So, the first one I think is dailies. A lot of people were completely burned out by Cataclysm, and then they went into 5.0, and they were hit in the face with a completely unimaginably ridiculous amount of dailies. And since there was no cap, these people wanted to be, I suppose, optimal, and they were nearly forced to via pressure, because that's what a lot of other people were doing. It meant that they burned out very quickly, and this was reflected by massive subscriber losses. So yeah, I think dailies were really a major issue at the start of this expansion. It was just kind of shitty. Also for LFR, I think LFR has done a lot of hurt. Not LFR itself, but the implementation of it. There's a lot of social problems with LFR, and the people can't really communicate or anything like that. So when a fight does at least demand some basic communication, it just means that it falls apart. And you know what? A lot of people say, oh, you're just hating an LFR. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have been in Wing 2, the Siege of Orgrimmar, before it was nerfed. It was ridiculous. So this is a problem. Now, as well as these just social problems, there's also just system problems. For an example, if you're stuck in on a ladder boss, it really sucks, because what if you want to do the first boss of the wing? You have to then finish your current group, unless you want to quit out and get a deserter debuff, and then wait for another 15 to 40 minute wait. LFR doesn't always respect your time, and that's really crap. Another problem with LFR is the way the drop rates are, means that it's very easy to get a streak of bad luck, which can last you a week, and a week pretty much means, well, you've put in the work and you haven't got anything for it in a way. I know that it's not work specifically, the game is fun in itself, but one of the key parts of an MMO is the gear progression of your character, and when you don't feel you're getting that, even though you're putting in the right amount of effort, it really sucks. So that's definitely a problem with LFR, both in terms of the social problems and, I guess, the system problems. There's definitely, I think there's some things they can do to sort of socially engineer people to be a little bit more kind of decent, responsible humans when it comes to LFR, but I don't know if they'll really get those implemented, at least in a way that's meaningful. Another problem I think with Mists of Pandaria is that the expansion's greatest quality came in towards the end. 5.4 was way better than any of the previous patches in my opinion, and yeah, it brought things like Flex, the death of OMG so many dailies. Of course, the implementation of the Isle does need to be, well, the next version needs to be larger with a little bit more structure. One thing I want to address with the Isle, a lot of people have been saying Xiao Hao is ridiculous. No, Xiao Hao is not ridiculous. He's not meant to be a necessary part of gear progression or anything like that. Okay, you do get a Burn of Eternity from him at Honoured, but it doesn't take that long to get to Honoured. In fact, getting to Honoured with Xiao Hao takes far less time than it does to get to Exalted with the Klaxi or anything like that. And you only have to do it once. I mean, once in terms of, you know, it's not like there's loads of different factions to do. So honestly, I think that's just people QQing because they can. Like, they'll sort of grab any low-hanging fruit and rip them to shreds or something like that. So yeah, that was a problem. It's just, like, if there is anything, even a slight weakness, people are going to rip it. Hell, even if they reintroduce, say, Netherwing or something like that, I'm pretty sure there'd still be people saying, oh, it's too hard, because it was supposed to take, like, 20-something days, so people, yeah. So there's that. I think less connection to the world is a problem. This is perhaps a bit of an odd one, but I think these days endgame WoW nearly feels like a user interface that allows you to get into content instead of being a world. It should be called User Interface of Warcraft, not World of Warcraft, because they do such a great job of taking you out of that world and into a menu. I think this makes people, it just makes them see content as being far more disposable, not really worth as much, and it doesn't feel like it's placed in the world, which sucks. I mean, for the longest time, I thought the Mogushan Vaults was in the middle of the Vale, which I thought was really strange because it's surrounded by 2 Alliance cities. Would you have really known? Apart from like that one bit in the 4th or 5th boss when you're outside? Not really. I mean, it's things like that are a bit of a problem. And that was for LFR, of course. That was before I was like full-on raiding this expansion, because I came in, I'd say, a few months before 5.2 came out. And I just came in late because, honestly, the start of the expansion bored the death out of me, but I saw pretty good things in the new raids. Anyway, another thing I think is a problem is weak lore, and the lore was definitely shoehorned in. Blizzard will, I'd say, even admit this themselves. Pandaria was definitely a thing, but it was very much slotted into World of Warcraft, and people didn't know any of the characters, they didn't really have any prior idea about the place. And what this actually ended up in terms of story is that instead of Pandaria having its own story, we brought our story there, which makes Pandaria feel like less of a place. Who are the characters we're talking about now? We're talking about the Alliance and the Horde again. We're not really talking about Arthas or Illidan or Deathwing or anything like that, which is a bit of a, I think it's a bit of an issue actually. So yeah, weak lore. Next expansion should be much better on the lore front, because it's either going to be, well, hopefully, I'm really hoping Other Planet, Aurelia, Terulion, stuff like that, which will have, I can guarantee, will have brilliant lore, because it's really well pre-established. Or even if we went down to Asharan, Azoth, stuff like that, South Seas, I think it would still have more lore, it has more of a basis in the world, like the pre-established world. Which is good. Another thing is leveling. Now, this is more of a personal one, and I know this is going to completely, like, go against what the guy who left the question thinks, but I think that this was actually the worst leveling experience they've introduced in an expansion. It's so heavily dumbed down and streamlined that I just can't enjoy it anymore. I think it's far too linear, and they blow through quest hubs at such a fast rate that there's no sense of place in the world. You know, you just kind of like fall into this mindless droll, there's a big slog through a zone, you don't really feel like you've been to the place. I think that's definitely a big problem. Also, you no longer feel like an adventurer in many cases, you feel like the bitch to some character. It's different from like landing somewhere, going to a town, and the guy saying, oh hey, we need you to, we're being attacked, go do this, because, everyone will die if we don't. Whereas this, it just feels like you're far more handheld by characters, rather than you going to a character and finding out what to do. I guess it's because so much of the quest progression is locked by stuff. I don't know. I just don't think it's that good. Another problem, I think, that it really suffered from some weak zones. Especially, I think, Conlai Summit was very weak in a lot of places. I think that Dread Wastes was absolutely disgusting. It was terrible. Tolong Steps was ridiculously linear to the point where it just, my eyes were going to bleed. It was terrible. So yeah, I think they really fucked up the leveling experience massively. Another thing they completely messed up was the XP balance thing, where you could do like hours of questing and your bar would, on a sort of hour-to-hour basis, your bar would hardly move, which meant that you didn't really get a lot of a sense of progression while you were leveling. It just sort of felt like you were constantly headbutting this wall and seeing a tiny, tiny, tiny crack emerge every hour, which wasn't fun. And also I think that once they start putting in 10 levels at a time again for expansions, they'll be able to do more zones, and since you'll blast through the levels a little bit quicker, in terms of specific levels, overall time probably roughly the same, if not a little longer, and that will, I think, just make things a little bit more varied, because at the end of the day, the only real variation you had was Valley of the Four Winds or Karasang Wilds, neither of which I think were particularly strong zones, although I did appreciate that Valley of the Four Winds branched out a little bit more. The problem with it is that really it was all filler. There was no good story there. So, part 2, the things that I like. So yeah, the second part of the question. Well, pretty much I really like raiding, especially in patch 5.4 in terms of the actual raid itself. That said, I don't think I'm enjoying it as much as I could, because our team's progression is getting really frustrating due to non-game issues. Basically, I just wish we could have our 5.2 comp again, because it was absolutely deliciously brilliant and glorious, and the current one is not. So yeah, that's a thing. Sorry to all the guildies who may have listened to that, but hey. It's just weird the way that's all kind of worked out, people leaving and stuff, and I just don't feel like the team at the minute's getting the progression that it could be. And also some of the real grounding characters of the group ended up leaving for real life stuff, which is kind of sucky no matter what way it comes. So there's that. Also, I think the art of this expansion was absolutely brilliant. I really liked Blizzard's interpretation of the whole Chinese theme. I also think the music's fantastic. well, most of the music. The kind of sweeping Asian style music's great, but stuff like the Klaxy music I thought was crappy. I think Siege of Orgrimmar's got pretty good music too, so yeah, music was nice. Also more endgame variety. More to do is always a good thing. That said, it does make my head on how menu driven the endgame's been, but still it's more varied. I like the Time of the Siles as an addition because it's different from the general daily thing, which I think is definitely nice. And finally guild stuff, because being in a guild is probably what's going to keep you playing an MMO for longer, because you have that social connection, interaction with people that keeps you coming back. But yeah, that's it. Anyway, if you want to leave a question, do so in the comments, and with that, I'll see you next time.